This episode of Historians at the Movies podcast is brought to you by our Patreon.com subscribers. If you would like to help support Historians at the Movies podcast, you can do so by visiting patreon.com/Historians at the Movies. Now on with the show. Hey everybody, welcome back to Historians of the Movies podcast. I am your host and creator, Jason Herbert, and every single week we are talking about movies and the histories behind them. Guys, we're going to be coming back in late January, early February. So we are releasing some older episodes that maybe you haven't had a chance to hear yet. Some of my favorites, some episodes I think they're really, really good. And this episode is one of my low-key favorite films. It's The 13th Warrior, starring Antonio Banderas, and with two of my great friends. I'm talking about John Wyatt Greenlee, whose name I can, in fact, pronounce, and Thomas Lecaque. And this is a fun conversation to talk about this movie, which is really a play on the Beowulf story, but brings in a lot of real actual history. Then you're going to find out this is actually a real low-key history film. So if you haven't seen 13th Warrior, if you have seen 13th Warrior, this podcast is a lot of fun. I really love these two guys, and the conversation is a blast. So sit back and relax. 13th Warrior is next on Historians of the Movies podcast. What's going on, dudes?
Hey, how's it going?
It's hot. It's like, so I'm down here in South Florida, and it's already like muggy, nasty, just gross, drippy, disgusting. We've had like nonstop rain for like the last week. It's like, we don't have seasons in Florida. We don't have like spring, summer, winter, fall. We have wet and dry, and we are full into wet season now. So it's going nuts. So yeah, where are you guys at? Tom, where are you?
I'm in Des Moines, Iowa. Grandview University, where it is a beautiful spring day, so beautiful that the pollen means I can't breathe properly. Springtime, awesome. It's wonderful.
John, what about you? Where are you at?
I'm a little outside of Ithaca, New York, and we've had a pretty cold spring mostly, but today it's like 80 degrees, and I went out for my first bike ride of the year. It was like, yes.
It's like, well, yeah, you're like 80 degrees. For us down here, it's like, okay, what parka do I throw on Wednesday? I'm like, right, is it chilly weather? You know?
Yeah, but like we've been like highs in like the 40s for a lot of the spring, 30s and 40s. To like this is really nice. It's been nice all week, but today's especially good.
You know, I was up in December. I was up in Binghamton. And got a chance to see a little bit of that countryside. I actually kind of dug it, except for the fact that you had to take like 14 different airplane rides to get into upstate New York. It was like,
yeah, you really do.
And like I drove, they had a driver. I came in to give a job talk, and like which was great, and I really love the university. But the frightening thing about the job talk was there was this old woman they'd like hired to pick me up at the airport in like Syracuse or something like that, and then drive me. And I'm not a religious man, and I know you guys sometimes talk about the scholar religious stuff like that. I've never been closer to God in my life than in that hour. And I grew up like Southern Baptist, right? Like I know I'm going to hell at some point in time, but I thought it was last December, like because I was so afraid the whole time that. Like,
and it's pretty much a straight interstate shot from Syracuse down to Binghamton too. So you didn't have to do all the like twisty upstate New York roads.
No, and like so like we're driving by cars, and I'm like mouthing at people, I'm sorry, you know, as we're it's so bad, and like I'm ready to like say like, lo there do I see my father, lo there do I see my mother, and sisters and brothers before me as we're driving down there. I'm just like, I'm ready. Let me live these last few moments as a good man. So for those people who are listening, I'm sure I've done, you know, if you were listening by now, I've probably already done the intro. I hope so. This is on a complete flaw. I don't know, is it?
If not, it's a hell of an intro, so, you know.
Yeah. Right? Just, you know, so we're doing 13th Warrior today. And
yes.
This is a movie we haven't done on HATM. And I think it's like one of those perfect, like, it kind of fits that kind of sweet, it's a movie, it's like, it's not an epic, although I think maybe it kind of tries to be. It doesn't quite get. We'll get into it.
It wants to be. It really wants
to be.
It's not a good movie, I don't think, but I love it anyway. You know, there's.
Yeah.
Yes.
I was just talking to Kathleen Ballou a couple weeks ago, and we did Con Air, and she's like, "I love bad movies," and I'm like, "This is a bad movie that I love." Like, I love 13th Warrior for so many different reasons.
Yes.
And Tom, when we were talking about this early on, like I was like, hey, you want to do a movie? And you're like, yes, this is the email I've been waiting, the message I've been waiting for all my life. I'm like, whoa,
yes,
whoa,
yes.
There's got to be more to do in Iowa than I know about. But and then we were like 13th Warrior, like right off the bat. So, and John Wyatt, you were like, let's do it.
Yes. Yeah. Thomas sent me an email. I was like, hey, you want to do this with me? Like, oh, yeah. I love that movie. I really do.
Oh, my God. You're right. It's bad, but so good in its badness in every possible way.
All right. We got to do one quick thing before we've got to go ahead and take sides here. Tom, I know you've weighed in on this before. All right. Let's do it. Let's get you guys on the record. Coke versus Pepsi. Where are we at? Where's the war?
Thomas?
JW, after you.
All right. Fine. Coke. Absolutely Coke. But I will say that I really don't drink it much anymore. I used to a lot, but when I had kids, I decided I didn't want my kids to drink a lot of carbonated drinks, and so I stopped because I couldn't handle the hypocrisy of it. so Coke as a theology, right?
Okay,
but I'm non-practicing.
You're culturally Coke.
Yeah.
Is this where we are? You're culturally Coke?
Like this.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. I am obviously also very much # Team Coke, which now that's going to get taken out of context, and there goes my career. But Coca-Cola is the way. I don't drink a lot of soda either anymore. It is just coffee, black coffee, straight into my veins.
Yes.
And listen, since we're all in agreement, and this can't be a war, I'm also just going to go ahead and throw onto the record Kansas City style barbecue and Chicago deep dish pizza. And I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna excuse myself. I'm gonna walk out. JW,
listen,
have fun talking about the 13th Warrior.
That is so in line with your other food choices, because I have, in fact, one of your tweets saved in my bookmark every time I disagree with your food taste, when you're like, I like well done steak, and I'm like,
I do. I regret nothing. I will eat it medium well. I will even eat it medium. I like my steak well done, slowly, lovingly cooked. And this is not the worst thing I've been wrong on. I'll be wrong on many more things in my life.
Well, hopefully you'll be wrong today, and we'll be like, your takes on this movie, you're dumb. There should have won an Academy Award. Obviously it should be.
I don't know that I can go that big, but I'll try.
Oh, we're gonna do some hot takes on 13th Warrior. So all right, so talk to me a little bit. Obviously, I brought you guys together. Before we jump into this movie, what kind of history do you guys do? Like, so let's ground ourselves. When you're not tweeting about hot takes, and God forbid, fucking Kansas City barbecue. I like ketchup too, just not all over my barbecue.
All right, so, Thomas, you want to? I led off with my Coke theology, so.
I will lay claim to studying religion and violence and apocalypticism in a variety of random fucking time periods. I'm an associate professor of history at Greenlee University, but I'm half the department. So I kind of teach everything. So that has kind of guided the fact that I have themes I work on, and I work on them in a very wide swath of history. And I am working on becoming an early Americanist right now.
Are you serious?
Oh yeah. No, this is the new move. The next book project is going to be on the rhetoric of Holy War rhetoric in colonial America.
Oh wow. Okay, cool.
Yeah. No, I'm having fun. I also read about video games. This is the other area I read about.
John, are you also switching gears? Or are you just like, fuck Europe? I don't give a shit.
Right. So I'm sort of all over the place too. Although, so I have my PhD in medieval studies for Cornell, and I'm teaching there this year. But that's, I think, just this year. So I'm not really sure what I'm doing next year. I meant to study maps and cartographic history. It's kind of where my training was, and then I got sidetracked with eels and have become like the world's premier eel historian, which, like I can pretty confidently say that because I don't think there are any other ones, but like that's my particular niche in the field. So I do a lot of work with eels in medieval history and medieval England, especially, but also sort of more broadly and globally, and I do a lot of work on Twitter trying to tie sort of medieval history with eels to modern conservation topics, because I think it's a useful way of taking the work that I've done as a medievalist and making it fucking matter in the world. So I do that. I draw maps. I have a map drawing business.
Your map drawing shit is cool. I looked at your website.
Thank you. It's a lot of fun. I sort of fell into that by accident too, but it's been enjoyable. So like, right now, kind of looking forward, I'm like, well, I don't have a teaching gig next year, so we're going to try to draw a whole lot of maps. So yes, if you need a map somewhere out there, people out there, if you need a map for your book or project or something, let me know. Surprised eel maps. I will make you a map. I'll put an eel on it. It will be fucking great.
I need you to do a map for me where we put like cows on there at some point in time, as I'm trying to figure out what my book is going to be about. Because I finished defending my disc last year, and now I'm in that stage right now where I'm like, okay, write your book. And I'm like, I don't know what I wrote anymore. What am I doing here? It's like this whole thing where I'm just like, you know what? Maybe I'll just write the history of Florida. I'm like, that's not relevant to any of our lives right now.
I've had such a hard time trying to think about how to take my dissertation and turn it into a book because it needs restructuring, but I've spent so much time with the structure in my head that I'm like, I can't conceive of it.
It's interesting. I was actually talking to Bart Elmore yesterday on that pod that didn't get recorded, so sorry about that, Bart. Like, we did Aliens, so I'm promising Bart that he gets to do Tombstone next, and I'm like, he gets his pick of the litter. But I was talking about this, like, you spent all this time writing your dissertation. For most people who don't know, traditionally a historian's first book is going to be some take on their dissertation. And Tom, you've been through this. And then you were like, fuck that.
Going through it.
I'm still going through it. And I promise you, JW, you're getting an email from me when I finish editing these last 2 damn chapters.
Okay. But it's a hard thing because it's got to be like, it's a take on your disc, but you're having to rethink it. And you've already spent like a decade working on this goddamn thing. And you're still like the last thing in the world you want to do. And now it's like, hey, don't worry. Only your career depends upon you doing this some more.
That's all.
Plus this
That's
podcast.
all.
Nothing big. It's fine.
It's actually kind of funny, actually, because 2 things, John Wyatt. Like, first of all, you came up in my Tuesday night trivia conversation the other night, which was like one of the questions was like, spell eel, and I was like, fuck yeah, I got this. And then,
spell eel.
Yeah, it's a low bar. We're in South Florida, man.
All right, sweet. Okay, cool. I can roll with that.
The amazing thing is, like, not everyone got that one right, because when everyone gets the question right, you do a toast, and there was no toast after eel. And then, on maybe a little bit more serious of a point, though, so the last few years, I was actually working for the Seminole Tribe of Florida, doing some stuff on, like, Everglades restoration and water rights and things like that, and, like, what water means to folks. And one of the things that became apparent, I started to kind of read more broadly about water rights and stuff like that. And I was actually talking again yesterday about this, especially like in damming situations in the Pacific Northwest. There are eels and things like that become very important. We think about salmon a lot, but eels are also part of those equations as well. So, if you would like to also become an early Americanist, we'll just broaden this whole thing, because we could do some eel history here. So people are like, we're going to talk about 13th Warrior? I saw no eels in Eels are poorly represented in film, are they not?
Yes. No, it's really true. It's a real problem. And when they show up, it's very often like bad. Like the
Little Mermaid.
The Little Mermaid, the Shrieking Eels, the Princess Bride, the eels in the Tin Drum that like freak everybody the hell out. Yeah.
Can you imagine how delicious the Shrieking Eels would be if you caught them and cooked them in pastry?
So good. So good.
Yeah.
Barbecued? Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
yes.
Put a lovely sugar-based glaze on them. All of a sudden, Kansas City style eel.
He hit the thing over the head. He should have dragged it into the boat.
What was he thinking? Wasted opportunity.
He got the princess instead, man. What the hell?
I'm going to go Robin Wright over eels, but that's just me. It's
I guess.
It's fine.
Yeah.
That's legit.
Yeah, that's fair. But he could have done both, honestly.
All right, 14 minutes into this freaking pod, we'll actually bring up the movie. Why are we talking about 13th Warrior? Of all the medieval films we could be, and there's no shortage of medieval films, right? They maintain this huge space, I think in a lot of ways in the American imagination, I would assume as well in other parts of the world, but maybe you guys could speak to it a little bit more than I can. We could have done any number of things, and we were like, Antonio Banderas, let's go. Why do we love it so much?
So when Thomas asked me if I wanted to do this with him, I'm like, yes, because this is the best Beowulf adaptation on film that there is. Like, I will stand, and I know you're going to disagree with me here, Thomas, but that's my take on it. That's my rationale. Like, I love this movie because I think Beowulf's a really fun epic, right? Medieval epic, in a lot of ways. But I really feel like this is the best adaptation there is. You want to go ahead and tell me why I'm wrong, Thomas?
Listen. I think this is my second favorite medieval movie. So like, I love this movie. I would argue that The Grinch is a better Beowulf adaptation than 13th Warrior, but like that's the only thing. Because The Grinch is Grendel. That's why he's mad. It's all the noise. It's,
Grendel does a face turn?
no, I don't have a better answer than that. That's really I think The Grinch is the only better Beowulf adaptation because The Grinch is an excellent Grendel. I love this movie. It's a fantastic adaptation of Beowulf. It's a fun movie. I will say for me, it's the language scenes.
Yeah,
I'm a sucker for the language scenes.
I love the language scenes. It's probably my favorite. In fact, we had people, when we were talking about this last night on Twitter, people were saying, I love the language scene. I think the language scene is so incredibly well done.
Yep.
And you see this a little bit, well, you see a transition of this in Hunt for Red October, where they kind of zoom in, people are speaking Russian, and then they zoom in, and then they're speaking English. But here, this idea is like, how do you get our character to to be able to speak that language, and then for us to understand that all of this is taking place in another language?
Yeah,
but it's in English so that we understand the storyline. I think it's one of the best things they could have done.
No, it's
really well done.
It's great. I love that it takes place over like multiple days, right? Like, and because they've got there's at least the one scene with the rain in between, so like that it's taking place like over the course of the journey. I love the way that they sprinkle in English words as you go, and at first you're like, did I hear that right? I'm not sure, and then like it becomes more and more clear.
Well, and it's the two language scenes back to back that really make it, right? So you have the part where you are actually dealing with a translation where you're going from Arabic to Greek and then to Latin, and that's how you're having this chain of communication.
Yeah.
Where on the one side it's translating Old Norse into Latin to be given to someone who translates it back to Arabic. And so you already have the setup that like, oh, there are a multiplicity of languages. We are having to figure out communication strategies, and then go into the fact that like, not only are there all these languages, but people do learn languages in the Middle Ages. I love it so much. It is the best part of the movie.
Wait, are you telling me the Middle Ages happened beyond like England? Like, I'm confused. Like, other places had the Middle Ages?
It's a theory, yeah.
I mean, how wonky do you want us to get in a very short order?
Let's go for it. So I think that's actually one of the cool things. Okay, so we talk about this being an adaptation of Beowulf, but of course this is actually an adaptation of Michael Crichton's book, Eaters of the Dead, which I read like way back in the day. I think, I'm 45, right? So like I went through my stage in like high school where I'm reading like John Grisham, and I'm reading Crichton, and I'm reading kind of like, that was like the hot stuff back then. I read like Sphere like 3 times. I read like nice. Congo like a whole bunch. And I read Eaters of the Dead. I didn't have any familiarity with Beowulf. So I was like, fuck, okay, let's go with it. But it's cool because, Bolvi is Beowulf, right? Mm-hmm. But we're seeing Beowulf from an outsider's perspective. And he kind of sets this, Crichton and then John McTiernan ends up setting this film. You see the Beowulf story through somebody else's expression. Only this guy actually kind of lived, is that my understanding? Like, I'm not so familiar with this guy. So I
have the volume right here.
Yeah.
All right. Let's talk about Ahmed Ibn Fadlan, and go from there. Like
you've got it in front of you, so go ahead.
Who is Ibn?
Ahmed Ibn Fadlan al-Abbas Ibn Rashid Ibn Hamad, the client of Muhammad Ibn Suleiman, the envoy of the Caliph Muqtadir to the king of the Sakaliba. He's an Abbasid diplomat being sent north to make treaties with various other powers, and he is a real 10th century Arab diplomat who leaves behind a chronicle of his voyage that includes a meeting with the Rus. Now, he doesn't then go all the way to like Sweden or wherever, but this is an actual real chronicle, and in Eaters of the Dead, if I remember correctly, the first 3 chapters of Eaters of the Dead are lightly paraphrased versions of the first 3 chapters where he's like encountering the Rus. Am I remembering this correctly, JW? Have you read this more recently?
I have not read Eaters of the Dead, actually. So.
Oh, okay. So I have. It's been a while. I think the first 3 chapters of Eaters of the Dead are basically taken from the Old English language translation of Ibn Fadlan's travels. And then the whole premise of the book is that this is a commentary on a newly rediscovered manuscript of Ibn Fadlan's further travels. So you take Ibn Fadlan's voyage, and then you smush on a fictionalized Beowulf, and it falls into my favorite genre of fiction book, which is fiction books that have footnotes in them.
Nice.
And there are footnotes everywhere. So it's like this, Fitzpatrick's War, which is like a steampunk, retro-futuristic retelling of Alexander the Great is another one. R.F. Kuang's Babel, Jonathan Strange and Mr. Norrell.
The Flashman books do that too.
Ooh, that's fantastic. I need to read those then. I love this genre because it's I mean, we're academics. You suddenly give me footnotes. Like, I read every footnote, and they're weird, and they're delightful. And I thought the book was great because of that kind of construction, and that you're starting from this real person who has extensive experience with a number of groups and is reporting this kind of, I mean, it's not anthropological, but like he is talking about all of these customs and rituals that he's seeing. He's talking about the people he meets. He's trying to leave a rich descriptive report that will serve as the basis of future diplomatic missions so that people do not blunder into these territories and are experiencing these activities for the first time. Like, what the hell is this? Here's the weird shit I saw. Be prepared for this weird shit. Let's make sure that the next person is not ambushed by all of the weird things I'm experiencing. It's great. And so a bunch of that is depictions of the encounter with the Rus, of their ritual activity, of the burial of a king that are, I don't remember if it's a unique source of it, but like one of the rare narrative accounts of some of these kind of ritualistic activities. And so using that as a jumping off point for Beowulf is so inspiring.
No, I think it is I think it is like maybe the one source we have of that kind of record. Also, I think reading the same book you were holding up there, the introduction of it, it was talking about how, and I'm not a Norse scholar at all, but was talking about how there's not a lot of archaeological evidence in Europe for that kind of rituals that are described in the book. So it's sort of positing that maybe that's a moment where sort of the Rus have been interacting with the Bulgar tribes and people like that in the steppes, and so it's a sort of intermixing of cultural traditions.
Well, isn't that what this book, I mean, what this early parts of the film actually do? If we're looking at this as actual scholars, right? And that's part of the fun part of this whole thing is like going back and looking at this stuff. It's like, oh, wait a second. This was an incredibly diverse space and time where you had this mixing of people. Every so often you'll see these a Viking film come out and people will complain. It's like, oh, why is this? I remember there was this complaint when we first started seeing the Thor film. It's like with Idris Elba's casting. It's like, why is there a man of African descent in this film? Like, wait a second, dudes. Like, you think these guys live in this super isolated space? That's this movie kind of very cleverly, without like shoving it down your throat, just kind of says, yeah, it just, it's like, yeah, this is just what happens, right? Like, of course they had relationships with the Roofs and with these other folks. That's the job of an envoy, right? Yeah.
And I like that it sort of, it doesn't act as a surprise that there are Vikings and the Roofs sort of coming down and interacting, sort of coming down the Volga and interacting with the Abassids, like, because that was a thing that happened. The Vikings sort of went everywhere. So I enjoy that sort of, that the movie doesn't sort of take that as something that's terribly unusual. Like the Ibn Fadlan character is surprised by it.
Sure. Well, it's his first exposure to these folks, but not the Abassids, right? They're like, yeah, we know of these cats, right? We know of these other guys, these Tartars, and also like it's obviously the Abassids are, they're talking about, Baghdad being like really the capital of the world and things like that at that point in time. And we're looking at like one direction, like we're facing northwest from Baghdad. If I could borrow my Dan Richter's Facing Eastern Indian Country book, it's like they're facing northwest, but the Abassids are dealing with people to their east, and they're dealing with like they are quite aware of the world around. This is not an oasis. This is a hub.
Yes.
And an incredibly well-connected hub at that, right? So, I think it's a really cool entry into this thing. Could I ask you guys, though, like, when we're looking at this movie, Antonio Banderas as an Abassid, right? How do we feel about, in 1999, and Antonio Banderas is having his moment. So it's not surprising that he becomes the lead in this film, because he's this huge rise at this point in time. He's done the Rodriguez films. He's done.
Is this right after? Yeah, I was gonna say, is this right before or after?
Banderas is from Spain, so he's connected to the Mediterranean, right? So I'm not trying to use these basic ideas of like current geopolitical ideas. What do we think about Banderas' casting at this point in time? Do we look at it differently now in 2023 versus say 24 years ago?
So I think yes and no. I would say, I think I would have preferred that there was an actual like Middle Eastern actor, sort of as Ibn Fadlan. On the other hand, I think you can make an argument that the Abbasid Caliphate runs from like Tehran to Spain, right? Like Spain is part of the Abbasid Caliphate, although I'm not sure it is at that point. My memory is a little off.
That's when do we get because this is 10th century?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, so I mean, by the time Ibn Fadlan's going, we have the Caliphate of Cordoba.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, none of this matters. That's not where they cast Antonio
No,
Banderas.
they're cast Banderas because he's the next big thing.
If we're going for the pettiest reasons, if the Book of Ahmed ibn Fadlan is 921, 922, this is 7 years before the start of the Cordoban Caliphate. I mean, I would like a Middle Eastern actor in general, but like, we can get pedantic about this.
My point was more about the sort of global nature of the Middle Ages because you were asking about that earlier, the sort of like the Middle Ages is not just about Europe, right? like, no, it's the Europeans themselves understood that they were sort of thought of themselves as being on the edge of the world, looking towards the middle, right? And yeah, at one point the Abbasid Caliphate is enormous, and it stretches from the Atlantic Ocean to the Gulf of India, right? So like, I agree, a Middle Eastern actor would have been a lot better, but like, as a point of history, like we have records of people moving from Spain to Baghdad, right?
Yes.
Right.
Like,
yes.
It's a thing that happened.
Yeah, so I mean, you could make that. I mean, like, again, they didn't hire Banderas because, like, oh, you know what, Cordoba.
No.
But
they hired him because he's kind of exotic looking, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, that's the deal, right? Like,
and he's Antonio Banderas, so like, yeah,
he's Antonio Banderas. Yeah. He's gonna hopefully sell tickets, and ultimately, these are the calculated decisions you have to make as a producer, because there's ideas like, and I certainly weigh this, right? Because certainly you would want to have a person maybe from the Baghdad area, or from the region. At the same time, if you can't, it's almost like, if you can't sell the movie, what story do you have the ability to tell?
I mean, because I don't know off the top of Thomas, do you know if we know where Ibn Fadlan was actually from?
No, so I don't think we are quite sure. He is presented as being Arab, but we don't have any details about his background in any meaningful way. And I don't know that we have any actual proof that he's of Arab descent. I mean, Who knows?
You're essentially trying to say, this guy's a fish out of water in this situation. You hire Banderas, and he's this world. And I don't think that this necessarily takes away from the whole thing. I think maybe it's a good. I think the benefit of having this conversation in 2024 is like, hey, how do we think about representation now? If I were going to recast this film, who would I recast? Maybe we can do that, right? But it's like, who would I recast in 2023 if I'm remaking this film? Because I feel like this film is dying to be remade at some point in time.
I know who I would recast, and it's not someone from the Baghdad area. I would love to see Kumail Nanjiani as Ibn Fadlan.
Oh, he'd be great. Sure, absolutely. But again, not from Baghdad area, right? So,
no.
Anyway, I don't want to get sidetracked on this thing of casting, because I really want to talk about like the rest of this film and how much I fucking love it, right? So you've got the introduction of Banderas as Ibn, this fish out of water, and one of the things to dig about this film is like you get this slow acceptance of him as the film goes on. But by the time they get up to the where going up in the Viking land, I think they call it Minneapolis. I'm not for certain what the correct term is, but like there's a pretty quick acceptance of him after that first fight. They're like, oh, he survived. Okay, we like him, right? Mm-hmm. We love the language scene. What else do we love about this movie?
I love how the Vikings are completely unfazed by his existence. My favorite part of it is that the language scene is part of it. Like, oh, you're from elsewhere. That's normal. We've traveled everywhere.
Says a lot about Vikings as well, does it not?
Absolutely. It's like, you're going from Arabic. Okay, they don't speak Arabic. You're going to Greek. People recognize Greek. Why? Because you have Vikings in the Mediterranean who I think reached Constantinople by like the 830s. So there have been Norse interacting with the Byzantine Empire for a century by this point. We're fine. We don't necessarily speak it. We can move into Latin. We can play around. It's just the idea that like no one is worried about who these random travelers are joining your tent. Like, come, join us, hang out. Everything's fine because the Vikings go everywhere. I love that part.
Yeah, we see an incredibly interconnected Abassid Empire. We also see a very interconnected Viking people, right? Again, gets this idea that people don't live in these little bubbles in the medieval era. It's not England land and Viking land and all these other places. It's a world that's connected just as what we got now,
And that continues when they get to wherever sort of mystical Viking land they're going to, right? Like, it's not just that the sort of adventurers on the edge of the empire, are okay with difference. Like, he travels back to their homeland with him, and nobody blinks an eye about it. There's like, all right, cool,
just another day.
Yeah,
new travelers coming to hang out.
One of the things I really dug actually was like this pushback, this very subtle pushback. I was catching this last night. I was watching it. The way that Bolvi is shown is like, he's this big, massive, strong guy, right? Incredible swordsman, a warrior. But you also see he is an incredible thinker, right? So like they get on, he goes right up to even he's like, so no, you know how to write. How do you write? And then like a few scenes later, he's writing in his own. It's like there's these incredibly inquisitive thinking. This is not a brunt like Neanderthalistic depiction of Vikings. This is like all we do is war. He's a thinker, is he not?
He is a really interesting character in that respect, right? He spends a lot of time sitting and maybe brooding, but like sitting and being thoughtful. And in the one scene where he needs to go be a real warrior, right, where he has to go kill the mother of the Windles, he has to be pushed into it a little bit, right? They point him in the right direction, like, no, go do your thing, man, go do it, and he does. But like he's thoughtful about it.
There's also that scene actually where they've got to kill the prince's buddy, right? This is a fun scene. If you guys can talk a little bit about that, because I love this deception here.
This is one of my favorite parts of the movie, and it stood out to me when I saw the movie for the first time when I was young and didn't know what I was watching. Right, but it's a holmgang. It's a Norse, Icelandic specifically, like dueling ritual, and it's interesting in that it's like as you see it in the movie, it sort of incorporates a lot of some of what become later more ritualized versions of the holmgang, where they're like with the 3 shields, where they're like they each get 3 shields, and when they're broken, and at that, by the time you get, that's sort of a later version of the holmgang. By the time you get there, generally they aren't to the death anymore. But the idea is like to take a duel and put it somewhere. Holm means island, so like holmgang means going to the island. So it's initially sort of a duel fought on an island space. You go somewhere away from everybody else. We're not going to be a bother, and you go fight it out, right? But then later it becomes sort of like a portable, containable island. Like, so here the island is like the space of the ring, basically. But I love the sort of the ritual of it, which is really fun. Every time I watch this, I feel like as a piece of cinema, it doesn't make any sense at all. Like, I feel like the existence of the prince himself is there like to give a reason for the fight. Like they were sort of looking at it's like, okay, we need this fight, we need this duel.
We never
see really cool. Again. No, he gets pissed off at the end. He storms off, and that's it. That's all you see of him. He's only there so that his henchmen can get done in. And the explanation about like, oh well, the deception was the point. Now he's got to think. It's like, about what? But it's really cool. I really love that scene. I can't help myself.
Well, and it's a scene that's drawn kind of directly from the duel between the word duel between the prince and Beowulf in Beowulf. But because Beowulf goes on beyond the Grendel saga and Grendel's mother to the part where Beowulf becomes king, it makes more sense in the broader terms of like the line of succession, which we just don't get in this movie because we want to give him that hero's ending. But I love the fact that like it is that thoughtfulness, right? You do have to have this martial valor. You are having this duel between your ally and the prince's ally to kind of showcase like you don't want to mess with us. But it's the cunning is an important part of being a warrior, right? You have to unlock. There's I think it's when Beowulf gets to Hrothgar and is talking to the Watchmen. He talks about unlocking his word hoard to convince the Watchmen to welcome them. And like this is an important part of being a warrior, is that you're not just. You have to have that incredible strength of arms, but you also have to have you have to be cunning. You have to be articulate. There is more to being a warrior.
Yeah, that's right. Because that sort of back and forth with where they're sort of comparing feats of arms, basically with this Unferth, is it?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
Do you guys have a favorite Norseman in this film?
I have a favorite piece of anachronistic equipment on a Norseman.
Go for it.
I like the Roman gladiator helm that one of them's wearing. I think that's a good time. I love the, like, listen, all things in the past are from the same time period. It's like, why not have a gladiator helm?
You know about, the guy with the big chest piece is like, sure. Yeah.
I don't know. I really I can never remember any of their names other than Bullfight. Because they're like they don't stand out particularly as characters. The sort of the main Viking that he pals around with. I love
brother,
his sort of.
That's what I call him.
Yeah, I love his intensity. His intensity is great. Those moments where he's like, You're just like, like, don't worry, there are more.
It's her. Is it that Herger?
Yeah.
Well, he's the guy you're designed to like because aside from Banderas, he's the guy you see on screen most of all. He's kind of the entry point for Banderas. He's the first guy to like speak Greek. He's an intelligent guy. He's a guy you're rooting for as well. In fact, you're worried at several points in times that he's not going to make it out of the film because it's not called 13 Warriors Survive, right? You got to lose some dudes. There's him, and then there's also the scout guy, the guy with the awesome perm.
He's sort of like a Legolas version.
They call him the archer. Like, so when you watch the credits, they have like the men's names, but they also kind of have like the description of them, like archer,
which is really helpful.
Yeah,
it is though. It's like the cool thing is like you go, oh yeah, that was clearly the archer, and so forth. So one of the things I was watching last night as I was rewatching this film is like, and this thing always bothered me, and we kind of hinted at it a little bit earlier, was I think that this movie struggles with scale. For a few different reasons. We get to this kingdom, but this kingdom is like a house. And there's like, even I'm like, you couldn't keep a cow out of this place. But like, this feels like a village. And you end up having this like, I don't really get a sense of like how big this place is. If I were going to remake this as a film, I feel like you've got to set this on like maybe a grander scale. This feels maybe too small to me at times. I don't know. Is it realistic?
I had that impression too, right? Like, so Ibn Fadlan in his chronicle, right, in the book talks about the caravan he's in with like 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 people. Like, it's a big caravan, and in the movie, right, it's a handful of people, and then they get chased by like 20 Tartars, And the same thing with I had the same thought with the sort of the Viking village. It's like, this is supposed to be like the seat of a kingdom that was apparently large, right? Because when they show up, they ask about like, what about this other towns, like the outlying places in the north, and like, well, that was burned 2 years ago, and like, it's, I guess, supposed to be kind of the rump of a kingdom that is really struggling, but like, yeah, it really, it's very small looking.
I mean, the description of Herat, where Beowulf goes, it's the mead hall. He's going to the mead hall, and we don't get the rich description of the rest of the land around it. That's outlying farms and things like that, but that he builds this massive, sumptuous palace on the edge of the wilderness, and it's the noise from the palace that has so disturbed Grendel that Grendel begins coming in to destroy and consume the men to lessen the. Again, this is why it's the Grinch, the noise. But
to build that, right, there has to be the resources there. And like in the film, there's no evidence of like, yeah, because in the epic itself, in Beowulf itself, right, yeah, the hero is this massive, like, glorious, glimmering thing, right? Like,
yeah,
and it's a bit shabby in the movie.
Yes, I feel like Hrothgar's mentioned in a second Old English poem. I don't know. It's been a while. When I was in I did my master's program in English, and we did medieval literature, and so I've translated Beowulf from the Old English before, but it's now been 14 years. But I feel like Hrothgar is mentioned in at least one other poem in this kind of context of being a great king. But like, our real appearance of him, other than like the reference, is just like, he has this massive palace. It's a sumptuous palace. He has enough wealth that he can present Beowulf with ridiculously ornate like rewards. But you're right. We don't get a sense of that there.
Yeah, and there's also problems like when you see when you start to get the attacks. And I know our 13 heroes here are, really the best of the group, but it just doesn't seem like they throw so many of the bad guys at this kingdom. You don't understand how anyone survives that first battle because they're so easily overrun. I just feel like there's a sense of like, there's no sense of the dynamic doesn't feel right to me, where I'm just like, I should obviously think the good guys are in peril. I need to care about their outcome. At the same time, I'm like, wait a second, this is not a fight. This should be pretty easily overrun. Partly
they survive through like a kind of Deus Ex Machina, right? Like, there's the horn sounds, and they could have won, but then they don't. They just leave, and like, why? I don't know. Because the movie has to keep going. Well, it's obviously because McClellan is actually in charge of the. That would do it. Yeah,
bringing some civil war into this for us. So I'm almost surrounded. I've got no. You're not actually. So
No, I mean, it works better when it's actually Grendel and it's the singular monster. And so, like, it is the reason they survive is that you can eventually make this single combat as opposed to when it is the attacking army with such incredible numbers. If you brought down the number of them, then you couldn't have the fireworm sequence and all of that.
With the horses, and it bothers me watching this. I didn't think about this before, but this time watching it through, I'm like, where did the horses go? Like when they finally track them back. When they finally track them back to the caves, like there's no horses, but like when these dudes show up, it's like cavalry is the word he used, which seemed a bit anachronistic, but like cavalry.
Yeah. You can't have it all every possible way, and so like this is the problem. It wants to do all of the cool battle sequences in ways that make the Vendel not make any sense. So if you want them to be primitive, like semi-cannibals living in the sea caves, coming out dressed like bears, then have them be primitive super cannibals dressed like bears coming out of the sea caves. You don't give them mounted war leaders.
You know, I don't want to bag on this movie all day long because we all three love this movie. So like these criticisms we're making are like, yeah, all this stuff's real, but we still love it anyway. Yeah. Like, I don't care. I feel like watching last night, one of the real flaws of the film that came through to me was like, I have no understanding of the motivations of the bad guys. Like the lead warrior never says a word. We never see never see the mother say a single word. We have in order to appreciate a villain. And I think about this as like the Thanos thing. You almost have to like, if you don't agree with them, you have to kind of understand how they're coming to like their line of thought. We never even get we just know they're attacking. You know, can you guys talk about that? I mean, like this feels like a real failure on the part of the film.
No,
right?
It does. I
don't
feel
care
like
about the villain.
Yeah, and I feel like there's a bunch of like Grendel is in some ways a sympathetic character, right? Like he's this monster living out in the swamps basically, and then like this rich dude moves into his neighborhood and builds a massive like mansion and like plays music all night long, and he's out there and like fuck.
Oh my god, the Grendel is like Phil from Duck Dynasty.
I wasn't really going that way, but sure. But he's also this like I can't remember the Old English word, but he's a boundary walker. He's not quite human and he's not quite monster, and he sort of lives in this in between space. And like, okay, so he's a monster and he rips people's arms off and heads off, and that's bad. But like, he's also sympathetic in a way, and you can understand it. Like he's out there, and so he can't stand the noise, right? Like the crunch. And then his mom is like his mom. His mom is acting under like maternal impulses, and that makes a ton of sense.
And it's only after Grendel crawls back to his cave, having an arm ripped from his body, and dies in her arms, then she comes.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So that makes sense. I think so. Watching back through this in preparation for the podcast, one of the things that occurred to me that I hadn't thought of before, because last time I had watched this movie was before I went back to grad school. One of the influences for the Eaters of the Dead is the Gog and Magog mythology, which is this sort of medieval idea that the lost tribes of Israel wind up getting shunted off into the northeast of the world, and they get locked behind these mountains by Alexander the Great. It's one of the Alexander the Great romances, who like asks God to close them in behind the mountains, and he does. And then there's this entire mythology that develops about how they're cannibals, and at the end of at the apocalypse, right, they're going to break out and come kill us all unless we can speak Hebrew. So like that's the sort of this medieval end of times myth about this sort of the lost tribes of Israel shunted off behind the mountains as cannibals. And like that's part of what's happening here. Like, so I think part of the motive, like I think if you think about the Eaters of the Dead as being a sort of a Gog and Magog stand-in, part of the motivation is like they're coming from a radically different culture, and like as the end of times come, and it's the end of the sort of Viking kingdom's time, right? Like they're just gonna kind of appear and wipe everybody out for really alien reasons, just because they can. Like that made sense to me. But like I agree with, this is one of the reasons why I said I like this movie. I don't think it works. There's a lot of ways I don't think it works cinematically, because you're right. Like there's no, like you look at the Vendel and you're like, they're just mean, man.
They feel almost like Neanderthalistic. Like when you look at like the faces and the teeth and stuff like that, they're like I don't know if there's this idea of like incest or something like that, of this like they feel almost subhuman in the representation.
I think Eaters of the Dead, one of the footnotes presents them as being the descendants of Neanderthals. It's been a while. It's been a while since I've read the book, but I think that's in there.
And that was the sense I had watching the movie too. That they were sort of, I felt like that was maybe Crichton's effort at dealing with that like boundary walker thing with Beowulf, where he's or with Grendel, right, where he's like part human and part not. So like, well, how do you make somebody part human and part not? With Neanderthals, there you go.
Yeah,
but it's not explained.
We were tweeting about this all week, and I realized like there are there enough gifts from this film, because I feel like we're doing a disservice by not creating more gifts from this movie. Like, all I wanted when you guys would tweet would be to ask, which is my favorite line from the entire film, is there a cave? You know, I'm like, that's all I wanted to like. I love that line. There's something about it is like, yeah, cave time. Let's go.
Oh, man.
And you know the scout who came back who was like there's a camp up here, and Bullseye's like, is there a cave? And the scout's like, what? Like, why are you yelling at me about that?
Good surprise, dudes.
Oh, man.
How do you hunt a bear? How do you hunt a bear in winter?
You know what? It would have been great to have had.
Banderas impression.
I love it. There needed to be some scene dealing with why they're coming out of their caves to hunt them. I would have loved anything about that. That's what you would get in the remake now. You would have some opening scene. You would. I would love to see an eco-critical perspective on Years of the Dead.
Mm-hmm.
So there's an interesting thing here. Do you guys know who directed this film?
Michael Crichton did the directing of it when they reshot it, right?
No, well, I don't think we're about to reshot, because John McTiernan is credited as director of the film.
Oh,
and this is the guy who gave us, in order, in the 1980s, he gave us Predator, Die Hard, and Hunt for Red October. Right? He gave us all three of those.
Huh.
He gave us three of the great action films of the 1980s, and then something happens. This movie just doesn't quite click for all the reasons like we're talking about, and still we still love the film. Do you think the fact that like this movie clocks in like an hour and 45 minutes, something like that? It's actually a pretty quick movie to watch. Does this movie work better with like another 45 minutes? I mean, what do you do to make this movie right?
You make it Predator, and you make Grendel Predator. I really think you fix it by you just actually straight up making it a Grendel, a super monster, and you look the guy who does super scary monsters hunting people through the woods. Let him make a super scary medieval movie of a monster hunting people through the woods.
So essentially you've got Antonio Banderas going, if it bleeds, we can kill it.
Yes. Make it the Scandinavian Prey. I don't know.
Well, there was that whole line after the new Predator film came out, after Prey came out. It was like, let's set Predator in every time period and every civilization ever and go.
Prey is so good. I showed that in my medieval world class. That movie is so good.
It's great. Yeah. Okay, John Wyatt, you're gonna say something?
I was gonna say I would go a different direction. I think that you can keep sort of a lot of the same framing with the Vendel as a kind of Neanderthal. And then sort of you deal with it as a clash of civilizations issue, right? I think maybe, I don't know. I think it might be a really interesting story if you told it from the other direction, right? If the Antonio Banderas character comes back and works with the Vendel, sort of working against sort of the pressing of the sort of Viking or Christian influences, right? That are like sort of slowly wiping out sort of indigenous culture. Like, I think that might be a really interesting retelling.
Well, you do get the sense that times are changing in this film, right? They talk about when the chieftain of the Vikings we see his funeral. They're like, this is the old way. You will not see this anymore. And it does feel like, we're talking about, especially if we go along with the Neanderthalific aspect of the Grendel, of the fighter film. I'm going to be talking about like this like the rest of the night. I'm going to like, call my kids. I'm like, hey, it's daddy. You get a sense that like maybe there's a pushback of like this changing time, and it's the Abassids of all people who represent technology, modern era,
which is actually accurate for the time period, right? Like that you're dealing with a period when the sort of the center of the cultural, like the global cultural world, is really sort of grounded in a lot of ways in Baghdad, right? Like he starts the movie talking about Baghdad as the greatest city in the world, and he's not wrong.
It's not wrong, right? It was.
So apparently the original version, so McTiernan does get replaced by Crichton. I was right on this. The original version was longer. It has a much more focus on Antonio Banderas' character as actually being a Muslim envoy. The section that's happening at like the very beginning of the movie was like 20 minutes in, because they spend more time with his character in Baghdad and developing this. They changed the the original music, which was meant to sound more Arabic. They just completely changed the movie because they filmed the entire thing in secrecy and only presented it to Disney once the film had been shot. Disney's like, we want to change a bunch of stuff. And then they put Michael Crichton in, and then all of his stuff is in. A bunch of McTiernan stuff gets cut out. I want to see the McTiernan cut. That's what I like. The Snyder cut crap. I don't want the Snyder cut. I want the McTiernan cut.
Yeah, I want the. Oh, yeah. Let's. Okay, that's gonna be like 25 minutes when we get off line. Start like McTiernan. Who's John McTiernan? The youngs will say, and we will be like, no. Let me tell you of a great man.
I would like to see that too. I don't think that makes the movie better, though.
No. This isn't about better, JW. I want it. Right. I don't think it's better.
All right. Oh, I'm entirely on board with that. That would be interesting. Like the movie works best when it's not like hanging out in Baghdad, I think.
Yeah, I think actually they do a really good aspect of like, yeah, I got a wandering eye and I got sent away. They didn't kill me, but they sent me away. I was like, I think they handle it pretty quick. I'm like, everything I need to know is there.
I love that the intro there is like, I fell in love with a beautiful woman and her jealous husband.
I am the wrong party. I am the wrong party here. Clearly, he should have just let me hang out. Ooh, yeah.
Yep. Just doing poetry, man. That's all.
I have to say, I want to see the McTiernan cut. I don't think you can turn this into a functional movie. From what I remember, I remember reading Eaters of the Dead. It's been less than 20 years. It's been a bit, but it is a book that functions most perfectly as a book, because the most fun part of the story is we found this lost medieval manuscript. Let's make a whole show of this is the academic translation of this newly discovered manuscript. All of the coolest parts are footnotes and editorial commentary from the academic lens presenting this fake manuscript. You can't present that on screen.
Yes, you can. You just make it a 10-episode Netflix miniseries.
Oh, there you go.
Yep, but in which case we're going to have an entire 2 episodes in Baghdad, because none of the streaming services can pace anything to save their damn lives.
And no one will watch because we're like, I don't care about that. I think you have to get out of Baghdad as fast as possible.
The first 3 episodes are actually about getting into the library where the manuscript is.
Yeah. Oh my gosh.
It's set in Paris in the 80s, and you can't get to the manuscripts you need in the Bibliothèque Nationale. This is the plot.
It starts off with a historian going back. Yeah. Oh God. This is actually now become National Treasure 3. Is this is like Nicolas Cage show? Whoa, and finding out the rest of this.
Hrothgar is actually L'Ensommereau, and this entire thing takes place in Newfoundland. That's the story. That's what we've done here. That's the new plot of National Treasure.
There you go.
That works. We're at a particular interesting moment here in 2023. It seems like there is a newfound appreciation, what I'm seeing on film, for Viking culture. There have been all sorts of Viking Valhalla, Viking this, Viking that on screen. Can you guys kind of speak to that? Like, what is this? Is this a newfound thing, or just American audiences always been fascinated with medieval culture, Vikings? Like, what's the deal? Why can't we turn away from that?
So I don't think it's a new thing necessarily. I think it's a renewed thing. I think it's Vikings are the sort of thing that come around on a quasi-regular basis, right? Part of it where we are right now is the sort of really pain in the ass right-wing sort of white nationalist ideology that centers on Viking culture as like sort of ideal whiteness in a way, which is one of the things that bedevils medievalists no end. But that's certainly not all of it, right? Like there's a lot of, I think there's a lot in what we idealize as Viking culture that is also part of what we idealize in sort of as like American culture, right? Like the sort of independence, go off and do your own thing and forge your own way kind of like element, right? I might be wrong about that, but I think that's certainly at least part of it.
I think it really fits with the post 9/11 ultra grimdark representation of all medieval media, which I hate, by the way. All of my favorite medieval movies. My favorite medieval movies are A Knight's Tale, 13th Warrior, and Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, because like I want a Middle Ages with a little bit of color and a little bit of fun. And we get this like aggressively grimdark everyone is a shit encrusted peasant who's about to die with a sword through his gut. And Viking media in our kind of popular conception of the Vikings makes for a great place that you can have your grimdark epic of these lone heroes against forces of darkness, that it's just, a man and his axe standing against the hordes of the enemy, even if you are the hordes of the enemy. It's a great aesthetic for the contemporary moment where we want things to be dirty and scary and violent, and that seems like it appears in too much of our media.
Well, we see this reflected through things like Game of Thrones, right? All the Lord of the Rings stuff, all of that is very obviously heavily influenced by these ideas of the medieval era.
Yeah.
Right? I mean, with dragons.
Yeah.
So, hell, this features a dragon, right? The fire verm. I mean, it's like, this is a very... I remember I had a conversation with David Perry, Matthew Gabriel. I forget which one of the guys said this, but they were talking, I want to say it was Matthew. He was talking about a lot of these films were shot through like this blue lens to denote like this darkness of the era and so forth. Is like, just, I mean, they both came up with a book called The Bright Ages. Like, no, there's all this stuff going on here. It's not dark. It's
not for nothing. I drew the map for that book.
I have that book.
I'm just going to keep throwing that in there. No, I think you're. I think you're. I will say one of the things that I really like about some of the more recent Viking things, like the Assassin's Creed Valhalla game or the Last Kingdom series, right? So I think they do a really interesting job of trying to show sort of the intermixing in places like Viking Age England, like where it's not just like Vikings and Saxons and that's it, but like there's this entire like running together of cultures that's then overlaying like pre-existing Britain sort of cultures in Britain and earlier Roman influences. Like I really like the effort that some of these more recent things are taking to work on that sort of to get rid of some of the binaries that we tend to think about in terms of Vikings, because that's I think a much better representation of what's really probably happening. I do wish that they used more light in their in their film. Yeah, that would be nice. It'd be nice to be able to see some of what you're actually seeing.
Thomas, you already answered the question I was about to ask you now, which is like, what are your 3 favorite medieval films? But you said you like them because of the color. You said
A Knight's Tale, Heath Ledger. It's listen, none of it's historically accurate. It's not trying to be historically accurate.
Yeah, it doesn't care about it.
With it though.
But it actually, I think, makes a better medieval movie than most of the ones that are pretending at historic accuracy, because what it does is that, hey, people in the past are still people. They are human. They love and they hate and they have all of the real emotional qualities of any other person, because this is a real world that people lived in. And they danced and they sang and they had hopes and dreams of ambitions. And it's taking the Middle Ages and making it relatable in a way that I don't feel a lot of the movies do anymore. Like, these are people who just...
Is it not?
It is, and I love it. I love it so damn much. I also love Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves. It is my favorite Robin Hood. I love that Kevin Costner's like, I'm not going to try. We're not going to do a fake accent here, but it's again, Crusades, kind of a clusterfuck. Probably shouldn't have done that. Oh, Richard fucked all of us. We go home. He left us a shitscape. I'm sorry. I'm French. I'm universally anti-British monarchy. This is just one of those many places that, like, look what's happened. Great. We got fucked. But also you come home and it's like, let's talk about the fact that England is not necessarily a backwater where no one has ever traveled and seen anything. Let's have a little light. Let's have a little music. Let's have a little fun. Let's also deal with the fact that, like, we have plenty of problems. I don't know. I love that film.
I don't think the accent's important. In fact, I know there's the argument that the accent that we know of as English accent doesn't actually develop
exist
until much later.
Yep.
So it's like, again, that's one of the Banderas, like, well, that's not why they chose him. But at the same time, they would have tried it, because everybody, Brian Blessed's got that big, huge, accent and so forth. Doesn't he go on to be Boss Nass in episode 1? I want to say he does.
God, does he really?
I think so. I think that's Boss Nass. He's like, we do not care. Ugh, that's right.
That's fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah. All right. So we got these 3. John Wyatt, what about you? What are your 3 favorite medieval films?
All right. Well, I'm 2 for 3 with Thomas. So absolutely Knight's Tale. Like, I think most medievalists would land on that, because it's just such a joyous sort of reimagining, right? And like you said, it doesn't take itself seriously. It's not trying to. It's just fun. And like that version of Chaucer is, I swear to God, my mental picture of Chaucer. Like, that's Chaucer. That's who he is.
Paul
And I
Bettany,
think
like, makes Chaucer cool, because I fucking hated Chaucer in high school.
And I think that Chaucer himself would be down with that. Like, I think he would look at Bettany's character and be like, yeah, absolutely, that guy. And the introduction scene with him is just amazing. I really love that.
Yes.
buck naked,
To
just
trudge.
To trudge.
Yeah. Yeah. So Knight's Tale, 13th Warrior, and then The Name of the Rose, which is a murder mystery that takes place in a library. I love libraries.
that's the Connery film, right?
Yes. Yeah.
We need to do that on the Sunday night thing.
Oh, this is something I learned about the 13th Warrior, though, because speaking of Sean Connery, who quit movies after having done a bad one. So Omar Sharif is in this movie, right?
Yes.
And
yeah.
After having done this film, stopped acting for a long time because they said something like, I need to stop doing these things that suck but pay well.
Yep.
Was he not in Lawrence of Arabia? Wasn't that like where was that his entry into American audiences?
Yeah, he's the I can't remember who he is in Lawrence. One of the big sheiks in Lawrence of Arabia. Yeah.
Right. And it's like, oh, this was like, oh, we need a guy who validates this film, right? Like people, even American audiences look at like, oh, I remember that guy from that one thing, even if they don't know Omar Sharif's name, like his presence in this film is like, this is a real epic film. This is not Gladiator, this movie. It's like, I feel like to do all the things that they want to try to do. Like, again, you're missing the whole Prince storyline. There's a Prince storyline, and then there's not. It just kind of stops. You could have had him like defect.
There's actually two princes, right? Because there's the little prince too, who never shows up again either.
Yes, 1, 2 princes kneel before you. Princes,
that's what I said.
Princes
now
who adore you, right? One has diamonds in his pocket, I'm told. So
this one says most about you. I love Spin Doctors. Thank you for that. This is gonna be the highlight of my day.
Hey, audience, badip. That's my racket.
Can I ask a question? What is your least favorite medieval movie?
Me?
Yeah, both of you.
Oh, let me think here.
I never thought about the least favorite.
Not the worst. The worst is different. What is your least favorite?
Okay, there are a couple that have come up. They're actually Robin Hood films. Like, I tried to watch the one a few years ago with Jamie Foxx and the one dude from I can't remember. It was like new Robin Hood. It was awful. It was
saw the trailers, refused to watch.
So bad. God, see, I tend to like medieval films in general. I'm drawn to it. I can tell you, am I allowed to count Camelot, Arthurian stuff as medieval? Forgive me if I'm wrong or right on the time. Okay.
Yeah.
So I actually love the Guy Ritchie Excalibur, Legend of the Sword with Charlie Hunnam as I
never saw
it. Love that film. Love it. And again, this is a thing where they were going to set it up to do several. It's Charlie Hunnam and Jude Law and Eric Bana, who I love. They were going to set this up to be a whole extended, King Arthur universe. And they made some mistakes in the film. The film doesn't quite hit, but there's enough there to make you enjoy watching it. So it's actually one of my low-key, like, I can put it on Netflix and just watch. It's a fun movie. It's creative. It's, it's like watching Snatch only in King Arthur land. It's fun.
Nice. That's a selling point.
Like, I've never been so thoroughly sold on a film in my life. Okay.
It's what you're watching. You're watching Snatch in Camelot.
Sweet.
Excellent. Yes.
I don't know why they didn't market it that, because everyone else was like, "Fuck yeah, absolutely." So there's that. I didn't like First Night, actually. Talk about Sean Connery and Richard Gere.
Yeah.
And I was like madly in love with Julia Ormond coming out of high school, because I saw Legends of the Fall. I was like, I love her.
Yeah.
And because she had her moment, she had that, and she made the film with like Harrison Ford and Greg Kinnear, Sabrina, which was awful. I was always kind of surprised that she never, because there was a movement where I thought like she might enter into that Julia Roberts kind of stratosphere, because she had a look. She certainly had a talent for being on screen. It just never happened. I don't know. I feel like you're setting us up. Give me some movies here that we hate in the medieval era. What do we not like, and we'll just bag on them.
Kingdom of Heaven.
Yes.
How dare
yes!
you, sir?
The theatrical edition. Director's cut, I hate much less.
Is a piece of shit. But the director's cut is fun.
The director's cut is less of a piece of shit.
Is it really? Okay, so I have not seen that. So.
No. Okay. JW, I did not say good.
Okay.
Yes, he did.
Please note that, unlike Jason, I said
made.
less of a piece of shit. But the theatrical, and I'll tell you the moment
Let's
where in the theater that movie lost me, where the fucking Southern French blacksmith is teaching irrigation to the goddamn Middle East. That was it. I was done. They had lost me and they could never get me back from that point onwards.
I know. Up until that point, the irrigation scene is a bit much.
Up until that point, I will go ahead and use the language of my students. The movie was distinctly mid up until that point, and at that point, it went straight to hell.
No, the movie is great when they're in France. Like the whole thing when there's like, I have committed murder. Haven't we all? Right? It's like, I once fought 2 days with an arrow to my testicle. It's like, God, you were fucking Liam Neeson in every movie.
Okay, so if they had died on a boat and they hadn't make it, and it had just been them in France, no, that would have been a great film.
They do some good stuff in that movie, though, right? First of all, the soundtrack is fucking beautiful, is amazing. The cinematography to that film is insanely beautiful. It is a beautifully shot. If you don't pay attention to the movie, just hear me out.
Oh, okay.
And just watch the film as a visual piece. It is like
a screensaver.
I think it's maybe Ridley Scott's most beautiful film he's ever made. I think it's a gorgeous film to watch. The way that it is shot, the way that everything shows up on screen, it's a gorgeous, gorgeous film. And also my favorite part of the entire film is when they get to Messina, because you see this incredibly diverse world of the Crusades, where you've got Muslims, you've got Jews, you've got Christians, all living there. And it's like, hey, I'm just like, yeah, people come and they be here. And again, and you see, and maybe what you see here in that particular scene is like, you see a Mediterranean, like an aquatic world that you don't often see. You see a port city being a port city in that film. So I'm also sympathetic to the portrayals of Saladin. Again, I say this, that I'm not a medieval scholar at all. I don't know the Crusades at all. Like, only thing I know is that I grew up as a Southern Baptist and knew that everyone's going to hell. So I guess that makes me a crusader. I can't speak to like the historical accuracy. I liked how the film, and of course they're dealing, when you do the director's cut, it makes the whole scene with the child that much more understandable. Why Ava Green has to do the things that she does. So again, the white savior complex, not the best part of the film. Beautifully shot, gorgeous score.
There's one of the things you can watch on Disney Plus is like Star Wars landscapes, where the camera just pans over digital Star Wars worlds, and there's like no noise. It's just you panning over that. But for Kingdom, if you took out all of the dialogue of Kingdom of Heaven and you just did landscape shots, it would be a great movie. I love Eva Green. I have no notes to that statement. I love Eva Green. So like I'll watch any movie Eva Green is in, but her portrayal is great. I think Edward Norton does a great job in that film. It's just every other moment.
Uncredited Edward Norton in that film.
I know. It's a good time.
And Jeremy Irons shows up as like, I growl in every line ever.
Oh man. Yeah.
I was your father's friend. Now I'm yours.
No, that is my least favorite medieval movie for a wide variety of reasons, but I will say the director's cut is less bad.
Or Orlando Bloom probably miscast, because they tried to make an Orlando Bloom moment coming out of Lord of the Rings. You see him in Troy, not very good.
Troy's terrible.
He's just not he's just not a, you know what he's good at? Actually, no, he's actually bad in this too. I was thinking about Black Hawk Down, because he's the guy who like falls out of the helicopter, but he's doing this horrible Southern accent early on, and it's one of my great peeves. It's like, people try to take the Southern accent on, like, you're from Mars, like, yeah, I can't wait to get into action. I'm like, God, just fucking stop already. Just speak like a human. Do whatever. All right. Yeah. What else we got on bad medieval films? Is that just the one?
I also hate Ridley Scott's Robin Hood.
Yeah, terrible.
I have nothing good to say about that. They all feel like, what if you had made Gladiator 2 instead?
It's a bad film. And
now, even worse, they're making Gladiator 2, and like that's not what I meant by that. I just meant don't make these movies. And
Denzel is in Gladiator 2, though.
Well, fucking, I guess I'm going to see it in fucking theaters then, Jason. Well, there you go.
I want to see Denzel Washington as the guy from Man on Fire. That's what I want. Man on Fire.
God. I love that movie so much. I want to see us move Gladiator 2 into like to the end of the end of the 2nd century, and I want Denzel Washington as Septimus Severus. That's what I want.
Yeah, I feel like
I want him as emperor, and I want him to kill people.
I'm down. What are the pet peeves you get on these films?
So I don't actually watch a ton of movies. I know you hit me in some of the movies that I have watched, which is good.
That's good.
Yeah. So yeah, I watch a lot of movies with my kids sometimes, but like, yeah. Other medieval movies, I didn't much care for Ironclad.
I didn't see that one.
Yeah, it's a sort of siege of Rochester Castle that leans really hard into King John being an asshole, which, okay, fair enough. But it's one of those ones that just like relies really heavily on being dark and gritty and grimy and like.
Did either of you see The Last Duel?
I haven't, no.
I'm not that mad at myself. Is it?
It's good. Well, Adam Driver's in it. And Adam Driver, I think, is maybe the best actor of his generation. He's really good in that film. I felt like Damon is miscast. I like Matt Damon a lot, but he doesn't work in the middle. There's a certain, he's got a mullet. It's like, you can't put Matt Damon in the Middle Ages, and you can't put him as he just did the movie where he goes to France, only he's like his daughter's been like accused of murder, so he's like a Texas or Oklahoma oil guy. I'm like, you're not one of those guys either. Like showing up with like a MAGA hat. It's like, I'm one of y'all. No, just go be the Martian. You're good. So, all right, let me bring this all the way back to the big question here. Is 13th Warrior a history film?
I would say yes. And I would say yes because it takes an actual like medieval Islamic chronicle and puts it on film, like a decent chunk of it, right? Like the representation of the Vikings and the Rus that you get in the 13th Warrior is sanitized. This is a sanitized version of what Ibn Fadlan writes, but it's the thing. Like it's more or less straight from it. And so like even if just for that, I would say yes.
No, I'm going to agree. I'm going to completely agree. It's a mishmash of aesthetics. It is not necessarily great history, but if it inspired even a single person to buy, even Fadlan and the Land of Darkness, like, yeah, no, it does. It does in fact deal with an aspect of the Middle Ages that I think is missing from a lot of our pop culture. The fact that it is an interconnected world, that people are not huddled in remote corners, not talking to each other, that no one travels, that everyone is isolated, that there is a big, rich world to be discovered, and people go out and explore it and meet new people and learn new languages and embrace new cultures and are embraced in return and then go home. And Ibn Fadlan is by far not the only example of this, and you don't necessarily need fiction to tell it, but like this is a real phenomenon of the Middle Ages, that this period of time that we've just accepted has this name is an entire world of possibilities and trade and travel and learning and growth. And yes, warfare, but it is a time of more beauty and interest than we give it credit for.
And there's bear hunting information in there too.
Well, I think we've got it here. I think what we see here is maybe 13th Warrior might be the world's best medieval film, just ahead of Kingdom of Heaven, director's cut. And thanks for listening, everybody, for this incredible historical understanding. Thomas, John Wyatt, where can people find you guys on Twitter and elsewhere in the world?
I'm at T. Lecaque. I'm the only Thomas Lecaque. I'm easy to find. If you want things I write without me swearing at trolls on Twitter, which is a mistake on your part, I'm also on LinkedIn.
Yeah, no, you should definitely sign up for his swearing because it's top notch.
It's a thing of beauty. I'm like, sometimes I find myself, I'm like, just fuck it. Just join in, Jay. Just go. So
I really like that Thomas, that your Twitter account and mine like operate on like entirely different tracks. Like
Thomas is like ready to come over the desk at somebody. Sometimes I'm like, hey, it's good. It's just like that's a bot. It's okay.
And by contrast, I go out of my way to make my Twitter experience like happy and like encouraging and enthusiastic. And so like it's we have roughly similar sized Twitter accounts, and it's always really interesting to me the different paths you can take to get there.
Yes.
So you could find me on Twitter. I'm the Surprise Deal Historian on Twitter. This at Greenlee JW. If you're interested in maps, that would be great. I have a website, Surprise Deal Maps. And that's where you can find me. And you can go to the website and look at examples and order maps, and I'll be happy to work with you. Or just talk eels. I can do that too.
I love talking eels with you. It is one of the pleasures in life.
All I want right now, I don't even want a book for a map for my book. I want like a Dungeons and Dragons map customized. I'm like,
I can do that.
I bet you fucking. I just need caves on there. I'm like, Thomas is like, what?
Yeah, no. I run a D&D campaign for my son and all of his other 12 and 13-year-old friends, and we're rapidly running to the end of the prepackaged campaigns I've been using. So, JW, I may be hitting you up for more things than I thought.
All right, knock yourself out.
Wow, we've completely lost the audience, and thank you, everyone. We killed history today with Jason Thomas and John Wyatt. So, all right, dudes, thank you so much for being here. I can't wait to talk to you guys about more movies. It's at some point in time. I'm sure there's something else we can bang on at some point in time. So, dudes, thank you so much for being here today.
Thanks for having me. This is great.
Thanks, y'all.